Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's your everydayness, Abby. So we are continuing with our series on the brain and its relation to mental disorders. So in our previous discussion, we learned about the forebrain. We got to know about its parts and their various functions. So today we'll be talking about the second aspect of the brain, which is the midbrain. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, and also share. So now let's begin with the midbrain. So the midbrain is the topmost part of the brain stem. In other words, it is the beginning section of the brain stem. So now what is the brain stem? The brain stem is the part of the brain connected to the spinal cord. So to better understand, it is the brainstem that connects the brain to the spinal cord. We got to know in our previous discussion that the spinal cord actually connects the brain to the rest of the body. So for the brainstem, it connects the brain to the spinal cord so that messages can be further relayed or transmitted to the rest of the body. So the brainstem is basically in charge of sending involuntary messages to the rest of the body through the spinal cord. And the brainstem to many is regarded as an important part of the brain because of the functions it performs, the involuntary functions it performs, and because of its connection to the spine. So it performs those involuntary functions that keeps the body alive. Yes, it controls those involuntary functions that keeps the body alive. So they include ensuring balance, ensuring digestion of food, ensuring that we breathe in and out very well. So these are the processes that keeps the body alive. So it is the brainstem that controls all of that. So now let's move on to the functions of the midbrain. So the midbrain controls involuntary functions because it forms part of the brainstem. And one of it is suppressing pain and helping us to stay alert. So it suppresses our pain and then help us to stay alert. Secondly, it also work on our visual and auditory signals before they are passed on onto their various or their respective centers to be further processed. And lastly, it is involved in eye movement. The midbrain is involved in eye movement. Example is when a light is shown on your pupil. A light is shown on your pupil. The pupil becomes smaller or it constricts. So that is an involuntary action that you do not have control over. So we've already talked about the forebrain, we've talked about the midbrain. So the next thing to talk about is the hindbrain, which is the last portion of the brain. So the hindbrain is the remaining section of the brain stem. We got to know in the midbrain that the midbrain is the beginning section of the brain stem. So in the hindbrain, it forms the ending section or the remaining or backward section of the brain stem. And the hindbrain is located at the back of the head and it looks like an extension of the spinal cord. You will see it as if it is extended into the spinal cord. So the picture shows it all. So the hindbrain consists of three parts. These are the pons, the medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum. So now let me say something before we continue with the parts. So the midbrain and the hindbrain together perform involuntary functions of the body. So all the involuntary functions that occurs in our body is by the midbrain and the hindbrain. And one thing we must also note that the brainstem has a part of the midbrain in it and also has a part of the hindbrain in it. So you might find some of the functions of these parts being the same or being similar because they work together to ensure that the involuntary processes or involuntary functions in our body are carried out appropriately. So let's start with the pons. So the pons serve as a bridge between the midbrain and the medulla oblongata. So let me take that again. So the pons serve as an in-betweener or a bridge between the midbrain and the medulla oblongata, and its main function is to play an integral part in rapid eye movement. We learned in the midbrain that it is involved in the controlling of certain eye movements or certain movements, including the eye. So the pons plays an integral part in this eye movement. And the pons also works together with the medulla oblongata in regulating our respiration or our breathing cycle. So these are the basic functions of the pons. Now let's move on to the medulla oblongata. So the medulla oblongata is the lower part of the brain and the brain stem. So as discussed earlier, it is connected by the pons to the midbrain and continues posteriorly with the spinal cord. So the medulla oblongata serve as the life-giving involuntary processing center of the brain. So it is responsible for our breathing, our digestion, and some reflexes. We all know that the spinal cord is involved in reflexes. Yes, that is very true. However, the medulla oblongata also performs certain functions when it comes to our reflexes. Example includes sneezing, coughing, vomiting, swallowing. These are all reflexes that the medulla oblongata controls. So that is all about the medulla oblongata. Now let's move on to the last aspect of the hind brain. That is the cerebellum. Cerebellum. So the cerebellum is the major structure of the hind brain that is located near the brain stem. So it doesn't form as part of the brainstem, but it is located just behind it or at the back of it. Yes. So the cerebellum plays a crucial role in controlling involuntary actions of the body. So it controls involuntary actions of the body. This includes how we balance, our coordination, our posture, and our motor memory. So now let's take some examples. So the cerebellum controls our balance, such as walking, holding a cup, riding a bicycle, riding a motorcycle. Yes, so let me explain this a bit. So it is the cerebellum which helps you to maintain balance when you are walking. That is why you do not fall off when you are walking. Okay, so when you are holding a cup too, it doesn't move in a certain way. Okay, it maintains that balance, it maintains that coordination. It's like some gravity causing it to stay in position. Yes, that is the work of the cerebellum. And also, when you're riding a bicycle, it ensures that there is that balance so that you do not fall off. So, it is the work of the cerebellum. So, when it comes to motor memory, one thing it does is that it helps stores all our motor memories or our motor activities to help us to remember them easily and even do them easily without struggling or going back to relearn them. Example is how to ride a bicycle. If you are taught how to ride a bicycle, and you become perfect at it. When you are going to ride the bicycle, you do not start to recall the things you were taught. They just come to you, you sit on it and you start riding the bicycle. The same as with a car. When you go and you are taught how to drive a car, you do not you are perfect at it, when you start driving, you do not start recollecting or thinking about, hey, how did they say I should drive this thing? You sit in it and it comes naturally to you. Then you start driving. So that is how the cerebellum helps in maintaining or keeping our motor memories of certain activities. One thing we must also notice that people who are on alcohol or people who drink or when you are under the influence of alcohol, your balance and communication and coordination, sorry, your balance and coordination becomes affected. So how is it so? When you take alcohol, it goes into the brain and it affects your cerebellum. So that is when you see people who are drunk, they have problem with maintaining balance. You see them falling off and walking in a way that is very funny. So it is because the alcohol affects their cerebellum. That is why their coordination is very, very poor. That is why most of the times we are cautioned that do not drink and drive because it can lead to other fatal accidents and other things. That is why we are advised. So because when you are driving and you're under the influence of alcohol, you wouldn't have coordination, you wouldn't have balance. You can just run the car into anything. And moreover, you are seeing things and you are in heaven and all that. So it doesn't really help. So Thank you very much for your attention. It has really been educative. Finally, we've come to the end of our study on the brain and its relation to mental disorders. So, this is the anatomy of the brain. I believe there are many other parts of the brain, but this is what is essential to our study, and this is what I want us to understand. So, in our next video, we are going to talk about these parts and know the disorders of these parts. We'll know the parts of these brains, and then we'll know the conditions that affect them when they are damaged and the functions that are also affected. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like and share. Do meet you in the next series.